What's up, friends? Welcome back to the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. Happy NFL Sunday. Another Sunday where we cannot get hurt by this Packers team, but should just be a fun, enjoyable Sunday as we get ready for Monday Night Football, Packers-Rams. I'm certainly excited for that. I will be in the stands for Packers-Rams, not in the press box for this game. Try to get to at least one game a year in the stands. It's Lambeau Field. It's majestic. It's amazing. If you have not been to Lambeau Field in the stands, I don't care if it's -10. I don't care if it's a preseason game. It doesn't matter. Like, find a way to get there. It is always magical. And if something does happen, by the way, where the Packers somehow get eliminated from the playoffs and Vikings and Lions games end up not mattering all that much in Green Bay, those tickets will probably be very cheap. Trust me, go. It is always worth your time. It doesn't matter if the Packers are 0-17, 17-0, anything in between. It is always an epic atmosphere. So I definitely recommend checking it out if you have not already. So very excited for that on Monday night. Quick, easy episode for you today. I know the big question going into this week and really for the remainder of the season is, can the Packers make a run at the playoffs? Or more importantly, from a Packers standpoint, can they finish out the season 4-0 or technically 5-0 since they already beat the Bears? I think it's an interesting question. As most of you have probably already noted, I'm not a huge believer in this Packers team being able to put together a string of, again, technically 5 games where they go undefeated. I go back to that Packers-Bears game, and they had to do everything in their power to do an 18-point unanswered comeback against the Bears in that game to win. I don't think that this is a particularly good Green Bay Packers team, although there have been some signs, particularly from the offense. You know, Keyshawn Nixon as a kick returner. There's been some signs of like, okay, maybe this team can be a little bit better than at least they started the season. And guess what? This is why we play the games. My son constantly asks me, there'll be some game on, whether it's basketball, football, and he's like, well, which team's better? And I'll say like, all right, this team's better. He's like, oh, they're going to win then. And I'm like, oh, that doesn't exactly work that way. That's why we actually play out the games and watch the games. So it's still going to be an interesting end of the season. And as I discussed with Ben Fennell a couple days ago, like, no matter what happens, this team is still very fun to cover because we could get a crazy 4-0 run that sees them all of a sudden propel into the playoffs, or we could see 0-4 and just complete and utter chaos going into this offseason. Or, you know, maybe it's probably somewhere in the middle. They go 2-2, 3-1, 1-3, and you're just left wondering like what could have been from this season. So either way, there's going to be a lot to discuss, a lot to talk about. But today I'm going to be focusing on what the Packers can actually do to go 4-0, and do they actually have a chance in sort of doing so. So here are my 10 ways that Green Bay can go 4-0 through the remainder of the season. And if things fall their way, which they're sort of expected to do, like they are better than a coin flip's chance of making the playoffs if they actually take care of business and go 4-0. The 49ers win over the Seahawks certainly was instrumental in that. They're still going to need some help from either the Giants or the Commanders, but things aren't looking too bad if you're a Packer fan and if they go 4-0. Like I said, the toughest part is going to be them actually going 4-0. But you look at that schedule, Rams, they're going to be major favorites. Right now, they are favorites over the Vikings by like a half a point and the Lions. And it's the Dolphins game that gives you the most concern. But the Dolphins have been a little bit more human as of late and certainly more beatable. And that's going to be an interesting game on Christmas Day. So number one on my list, 10 ways that this team can go 4-0 is that they need to stay healthy. They just came off their bye week. They are relatively healthy. The big issues, Rashawn Gary out for the year. That is massive and it's really difficult to overcome. 2, your key player on offense, David Bakhtiari, finally gets back from his knee injury, is playing phenomenal, and he has his appendix removed. And he may be gone for the foreseeable future. We don't know when he's going to come back. But outside of that, now those are 2 big buts, but outside of that, this team right now is very healthy, including Aaron Rodgers, whose thumb seems to be doing much better, whose ribs seem to be doing much better. If this is a healthy Aaron Rodgers and a healthy team outside of that that's coming off a bye, that's coming off rested, this team will have a puncher's chance to beat those 4 teams and maybe, just maybe, go 4-0. I like the way that this offensive line is playing. Even without Bakhtiari, I liked how Zach Tom played at left tackle against the Chicago Bears. We are finally going to see Romeo Doubs and Christian Watson. More on that in just a moment. And I think this offense can be explosive enough, certainly starting with Aaron Rodgers and his health, Jones and Dillon as that 1-2 punch in December. You're starting to run the ball better. These receivers are healthy. Like, I like that. Now, defensively, the Rashawn Gary thing is a major issue, but outside of that, you are completely healthy at every other spot. I'm very interested to see how they use Darnell Savage. He was benched prior to the bye week and prior to his injury, basically relegated to the dime defensive back duties. Will that continue moving forward? Are they going to continue to use Keyshawn Nixon in the slot, Rudy Ford at safety? Those are all going to be things that are interesting, but it is worth noting that outside of Bakhtiari and Gary, this team is extremely healthy, and they're healthy at the right time. So I think if they can stay that way and they don't have any other big injuries to this roster, they're going to be able to compete. This is always a war of attrition this time of year. Other teams are very beat up as well, and Green Bay actually not quite as beat up at the moment. So if they can stay healthy through these last 4 games, I think they're going to have a chance to win. Number 2, it is an old Mike McCarthy saying, but there is value in it and there was wisdom in it, and that's getting back to the fundamentals. This Packers team has not been a fundamentally sound team all season long, and it starts with tackling. You can't be a good defense if you can't tackle. You certainly can't be a good defense that's playing soft coverage if you can't come up and tackle. It's a really difficult thing to fix in week 14, or 15, 16, 17, and 18 of a regular season. But they're coming off a bye. As mentioned, they're healthy. And maybe, just maybe, this team recognizes that they need to change their identity a little bit and be a bit more physical as a football team. They got their face punched in by the Titans, and then they got, beat up pretty good by the Philadelphia Eagles and what they were capable of doing in the running game. This is a team that has to have realized that, hey, we have to be tougher at the point of attack. We have to tackle better. We need to be the aggressors. We need to be the intimidators. They can get that through, and they can be a more fundamentally sound team that doesn't just go for tackling, that goes for communications on the back end of the defense, that goes for understanding all the signals and being in the right place at the right time on offense. All those things have to come together. It's not impossible for a young team that this stuff starts to hit later in the year. This team has not given me a ton of confidence that they can all of a sudden start putting that stuff together. But like I said, maybe the bye week helped. Maybe they had a little bit of a moment where they recognized that they need to be better and more physical as a football team. Am I hopeful on those things? Am I optimistic on those things? No. But if they can get back to playing a little bit more fundamentally sound football, this is a team that, again, we're starting to see some of these weapons take shape a little bit. They're starting to put up some points. If they can put up points, they can put more pressure on opposing offenses. And maybe, just maybe, again, you can make a little bit of a run at things. Number 3, I do believe in momentum in sports. If you don't, it's fine. I can't scientifically prove it. But in sports, I believe that there is something to momentum. Packers beat the Chicago Bears. They get the bye. They are heavily favored against the Rams on Monday Night Football. If they start, win against the Bears, bye week, win against the Rams, they go to Miami. That's going to be a very difficult game. But they're going in with a little bit of momentum. The Dolphins haven't had as much momentum lately. If the Packers can pick up that win against the Dolphins, which is going to be very difficult, but I do think you start building towards something, and all of a sudden you get hot at the right time, and you start believing in each other, and all of a sudden things just start feeling a little bit better. You start gaining a little bit more confidence, and you start thinking, why not us? And every single year, there's a team that gets hot at just the right time. Not always the most talented team, not always a team that's played the best throughout the course of the entire year, but the team that just gets hot at the right time. If Green Bay can start becoming that team and start gaining a little bit of momentum, I think all of a sudden that Minnesota game, Minnesota's not going to be super pumped to play the Packers. The Lions aren't going to be super pumped to play the Packers. They could be peaking at the right time if they can start building this momentum. It starts with the Rams, which will mean they've won 2 games in 3 weeks, haven't lost in almost a month by the time that they face the Miami Dolphins going into that game. So they can just get that ball rolling. Maybe, again, just maybe, they can start gaining some momentum and start going in forward motion with a little bit of force and intensity. Number 4, we are finally going to see Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs at the same time. Romeo Doubs, the expectations have been tempered a little bit going into this Rams game. My guess is he still plays 20, 30 snaps in that game. And as time goes on, he should be able to play more and more. I do think there's a real opportunity, the way we've seen Christian Watson play, and if Romeo Doubs can come back and play at even close to the level he was prior to his injury, that this can threaten defenses in a way that we haven't really seen the Packers be able to threaten defenses through the course of this season. Add in Allen Lazard as sort of your steady overall possession receiver. You can trust him a little bit more on third downs. Randall Cobb is kind of your slot guy. I think that group of 4 can make a really deadly's the wrong word, but a really potent combination for Aaron Rodgers in this offense. And we're starting to see the confidence that Christian Watson's playing with. I'm hopeful that that will carry over to Romeo Doubs when he comes back. You've got Jones and Dillon in the backfield. I think this offense has the ability to be very potent as the remainder of the season goes along. And if there's going to be something that all of a sudden this Packers team catches the rest of the NFL by surprise, to me, it's got to be Doubs and Watson. Like all of a sudden, you went from not being able to beat press cover one coverage through the first 2/3 of this season to now having two wide receivers on the outside that are actually legitimately dangerous and forcing teams to play you in a totally different way. If that can come to fruition, really like what this Packers offense could do come playoff time, or if they get there, but more importantly in December and January when they play the remainder of these 4 games. And if they get there, again, they're going to be a little bit of a team that teams are not super excited to play, but it starts with Watson and Doubs and them being two diverse playmakers that Aaron Rodgers can go to, and those guys can make things happen on their own. That would give me some reason for excitement for the remainder of this season. Number 5, and maybe the toughest one on the entirety of this list, is that the Packers are going to somehow have to completely reinvent their defense. They do not have a pass rusher. Rashawn Gary is gone. Everyone else just isn't at that level. Kenny Clark can get there from time to time. Preston Smith, time to time. Enigbare, time to time. But they don't have a presence that other teams fear. And if you even have a remotely good offensive line, you're not concerned about the Packers' pass rush at all, which means you have to completely change the way that you are playing. You need to be more aggressive. You can't be as passive. You can't play as much off coverage because your front 4 is not going to get there. You don't have a linebacker that can blitz. That's giving teams troubles. You don't have a slot corner that can blitz. That's giving teams troubles. You don't have a safety that can blitz. That's giving teams trouble. So you have got to figure out a way and a formula to reinvent yourself on defense and probably bring a bit more pressure, to be more exotic in your rushes, to eat your vegetables on early downs to stop the run so that you can get to some 3rd and long situations and bring those exotic pressures. But you're going to have to reinvent yourself, because without Rashawn Gary, just playing the same defense that listen, it didn't work with Rashawn Gary, and it certainly has worked even worse without Rashawn Gary, understandably so. There's going to have to be some reinvention from this Packers defense if they want to actually go on a 4-game winning streak through the remainder of this season. Number 6, it's talked about all the time. Turnovers can come in bunches. Can you be the team that all of a sudden, hey, we found a fumble. Hey, we got an interception. Hey, Jair Alexander just picked off another pass. Hey, special teams actually blocked a punt. Can you be the team that gets those turnovers in bunches at the right time? And that sometimes that goes hand in hand with getting hot at the right time and having more confidence and maybe reinventing your defense. This is a team that's going to need turnovers. Plain and simple. They can't stop teams consistently enough. It's hard because in order to get turnovers, you usually need pressure. That's usually what causes turnovers. But like I said, they're going to have to be a bit more aggressive, and they're just going to have to be the team that, whether it's through punching out a ball or just plain stupid luck, they're going to have to win the turnover battle. And that starts with forcing more turnovers and maybe getting some of those turnovers in bunches. Number 7, we talked about momentum a bit. I think they need to continue to get the results that they need. We just saw the Seahawks lose to the 49ers. I guarantee you that that's giving some positive momentum to the Packers in the locker room, being like, okay, the Seahawks are falling down. That's another spot that we need to move up. We just kind of need to get some help from either the Commanders or the Giants. If we can get that, we're feeling good. Giants or Commanders, one of those teams is going to lose this week unless they tie again. But then again, the following week, you keep going along, and all of a sudden, if you see the other teams that you need to lose keep losing, and you pick up a win against the Rams, and all of a sudden a lot of those games are on Saturday next week, so they'll happen again before your game with the Dolphins. If all of a sudden things keep falling your way, it's going to give you that little burst of energy that you need to kind of be like, hey, everything else is falling in our favor. If we just take care of business, we can do this thing. And like I said, I think all of that's connected, that positive energy, that momentum. And if they keep seeing the results, like the way that it has these last few weeks with Seattle losing a couple times, I think they're going to feel like, hey, maybe we can just do this and maybe we can actually squeak in the playoffs. Number 8, they need to get a win in Florida. It goes without saying, they need to win that game. There are scenarios where they can get in with losing a game, and if they lose a game, it needs to be to the Dolphins. So if there is a game they can maybe lose, they're going to need a lot of help the rest of the way, though, and that kind of kills all your momentum and everything like that. So we're just going to assume that they need to win that game. you got to find a way to win in Florida. That has not been easy. You're used to the cold. You're now going to go into humid conditions in Miami, Florida, playing a very good, like arguably the hardest team that they're going to play the remainder of this season. Florida has not been kind to the Packers. And again, now you need it with your season on the line. So they're going to have to find a way to overcome that. They're going to have to travel a decent distance again, which is something that's caused problems for this Packers in the Matt LaFleur era. So they're going to have to travel better, and they're going to have to find a way to get a win in Florida. Number 9 is on the flip side, 3 of your 4 remaining games are at home. Rams, Lions, Vikings, all at home. And you need to use that home field advantage. You're playing a warm weather team and in the Rams, and ultimately 3 dome teams in the Rams, the Vikings, and the Lions. You can argue that the Lions and the Vikings are better set up to play more of a physical brand of football than the Packers. So it's not like you can just go into that game being like, hey, it's cold, so now we can out physical these other teams. But you are the team that's in cold weather. And I know Detroit, Minnesota, not exactly tropical paradises, but those are dome teams. The Rams are coming from LA. And either way, you have home field advantage. Like I mentioned at the onset, this is Lambeau freaking Field. It's always an amazing atmosphere. Use that home field advantage. Use that cold weather. Get those wins. Teams don't love playing there, especially if they're eliminated. The Rams are eliminated from the playoffs. Basically, you can hopefully get them, behind the 8 ball early and kind of put them away late. And then Lions could be, maybe won't be, especially if the Packers are still in it, but maybe the Lions are eliminated in that final game. We'll see, right? Ultimately, that's not a team, not a place that teams love playing, and Green Bay has to find a way to use that home field advantage to their advantage and try to pick up those wins. And then last but not least, number 10, another really important one. I talked about it with Ben Fennell a couple days ago. He put it perfectly. The stars need to play like stars. And this team has not had the stars play like stars. Whether you want to go Aaron Rodgers, partially due to the injuries, whether you want to go, even Robert Tonyan, I would probably not call him a star, but a couple years ago, he was pretty close to it, and he has not played up to expectations. You kind of need Bakhtiari back. You need Elton Jenkins to play like a star, but more specifically on the defensive side of the ball, your Adrian Amos, your Jair Alexanders, your Kenny Clarks, your Devondre Campbells, your Razul, you need your stars the remainder of this year to play like stars. You kind of need to make up for lost time. A lot of those guys are far below their expectations on this season so far. You have a final 4 games that you play phenomenal. Guess what? Everyone's going to remember the way that you played at the end of the season when it mattered most, especially if you can put those wins together and start stacking success. The stars need to play like stars. If they do, you've got a real puncher's chance at 4-0 and maybe a chance to punch your ticket to the playoffs. You don't, your stars keep playing the way that they have. We're not even going to remotely talk about 4-0, and we're going to probably be talking closer to 0-4 if we're being real. So whether it's realistic or not will remain to be seen. Like I said, I'm not super optimistic that this team can go 4-0, but that is why they play the games, and you never know what can happen with the right team if they get hot at the right time. And maybe, let's just say this. The Packers are due to be that team, right? They're always the ones that have played a phenomenal regular season and then fall off at the end of the year, and some team that sucked the whole year, that got hot at the right time, ends up beating them. Could the Packers be that other team this time? Where, you know what, they sucked a good portion of the year, but they got hot at the right time, they started to believe at the right time, and even though it's not the roster or the team that you're expecting to be at the beginning of the year, they just found a way to get things done at the end of the year, got hot, and beat some teams that they weren't supposed to beat. Maybe that can be the Packers this year. I'll certainly be cheering for it. That's going to do it for me today. Thank you so much for joining me. We'll be right back here tomorrow with an all-new episode, but until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.